Have you ever felt like you were the first to break the cycle? I'm your host, Danielle Zapchenk, and thanks for listening to the Parable Podcast. This is our final collaboration with the Baton Pass as we celebrate their spring event season called Illuminate When Light Reveals. If you haven't heard about the Baton Pass before, they believe when stories are shared, chains will break and divine connections will be made. Grateful to be a part of their advising team and honored to hear another Parable story from Shequan Palmer. Just as a trigger warning, or for those listening with little ears around, we do discuss domestic violence and murder in this episode. I will put timestamps in the show notes for your reference. Today, Shequan shares about healing from heartbreak and walking into freedom.
I know that I had gifts and I knew that I was good at things, but I found myself around people that said that, you need to still be humble. Don't do too much. And I think that over time, I just accepted that. I know that God called me to relationship.
Here's my conversation with Shequan Palmer. Well, we are wrapping up our third episode of the Baton Pass collaboration, and I am so excited for you to meet Shequan Palmer. Shequan, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So any friend of Angela's and the Baton Pass team is a friend of mine. So I'd love to get to know you a little bit more. My favorite thing is having people over, having just time to hang around dinner. It could literally be like refrigerated pizzas, or it could be fancy. But who within your circle, who would be your ideal dinner party guest?
Well, first person that comes to mind is probably Wayne, my husband.
Okay.
We still do things like that.
Yeah.
We love when we get a good Friday or a Saturday and we're surprised that there's nothing to do. We still do sleepovers and movie nights.
I love it.
So anytime that I can literally be outside of this and just in my sweats on the couch and being greedy and, in my own space, I'm here for it.
How long have you and Wayne been married?
So Wayne and I have been married 13 years. He's a numbers guy. So when he watches this, Lord, I hope that it's the right number. But it's 13 years. We have been together 19 now, I believe, 18 or 19. And that might be a story for another podcast, but, and then we have one son. He is 20 years old.
Hey, amazing. Yeah. I am not good at numbers either. Well, first of all, math is never a subject for me, but also I just forget. I told somebody the other day, I was like, oh, it's my birthday and I'm going to be 43. No, I'm going to be 42. Okay. So I've done that with our anniversary because I think of our kids, there's so many numbers, we have to remember and passcodes. So I get it wrong all the time. So you're in a safe space. If people met you and sometimes, we just get to know people and you're like, oh, this is what I imagine you're like. What is something that maybe people might not know about you, either hidden talent, something that you love to do that they would be surprised about?
Oh, my goodness. People would be surprised that I have a very eclectic taste in music.
Okay.
So any given time on my playlist, you might hear a little bit of country, hip hop, rock and roll, Spanish, folk, and it ranges. So if you're in my car, I also love to give concerts. That's another thing. So if you're in my car and I give a full on concert with you in the car, it's because I love you.
Okay.
So one moment we might be listening to Beyonce, and then all of a sudden we're listening to Shania Twain, and now all of a sudden Selena is on, and here comes Luther Vandross out of nowhere. Yeah. And so I have a very eclectic taste in music.
That's really great. I think it's good to have. I mean, I think that speaks to your personality as well, is that you're open to so many things and different influences. And I think that's amazing. What would you say energizes you the most day to day?
I am energized by, and I don't know if it sounds cliche, but just waking up in the morning. What energizes me, and this is part of the toiling I've been doing these past couple of years, is I really want to ensure that I fulfill the work that I'm supposed to do while I'm here. Yeah. And so whenever I get up, it's like a brand new day to do something brand new or to finish up something that I was supposed to be doing. But I just have a genuine joy for life. both sides. I've been able to experience what that looks like on both sides. And I mean, I was going to say, I don't know where it comes from. It comes from the Lord.
Yeah.
I'm excited about life. Yeah.
I understand the joy for life. I think for a large portion of my life, I thought, okay, yes, I have this joy in my heart, but I was kind of like waiting, like what's going to come around the corner that is going to be like my story that, okay, now I've suffered through this tragedy. And so now I can really share because I haven't experienced certain things in my life. But some friends have recently like drilled that into me, like that joy, that zest for life is encouraging and imperative that each of us have different things to bring to the table. So I love that for you, Shequan. So you are going to be one of the speakers at the upcoming Baton Pass, Arizona event. Very exciting. I know you're going to share a part of your story there. And for us here at the Parable Podcast and also for the Baton Pass, stories matter because that's kind of when the chains are broken, the spaces where women are able to gather and hear these stories. It helps us kind of break down some of these barriers. So I'd love for you today, Shequan, to share with us one of your parable stories.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, I am extremely excited. I met Angela through a friend at church, Legacy Church, named Amanda. And I kind of feel a way that I've never known about this. And so, yeah, they definitely have a partner in me, you know, and have definitely found a friend in them as well. So, yeah, I was asked to speak. And of course, it's a little nerve wracking. I don't know how you feel, Danielle, or maybe, I mean, you host the whole podcast, so maybe you've gotten past this part, but I don't know if you have ever felt like, do you want to hear my story? And I'm the weird one that'll ask, why? You know, like I'll share my story with someone one-on-one, and then they'll say, you have to share that. You got to speak at this. I'm like, why? I don't know if I need to do that. But I am excited because these past couple of years, so this whole thing of me being able to speak with Baton Pass here in Arizona is another answered prayer. And what I currently do for work, I work with families and children. I get to go around the valley and I share about adverse childhood experiences, parental factors, becoming mandated supporters. I know that some of you may have heard of mandated reporters, and that's where you would typically, contact certain services if a child is in danger. Well, I have the privilege of teaching about mandated supporting. So when you see a family in need or you see a child in need, it doesn't always warrant a call for the family to be broken up, but maybe there's something that you are able to provide or you know of a resource that you can provide for this family. And so that's what I get to do. I love the work that I do. I love connecting resources to families. I love seeing families be restored and flourishing. A couple of years ago, I coined this phrase, flourish within your means. My husband and I, we have this thing where we take turns supporting one another's goals. So one year we'll put all effort towards his goals. The next year we'll put towards my goals and so forth. Back in 2020, I decided that I wanted to be in a pageant. Okay. And it was extremely random, but that's one of the special joys of having a partner to walk through this thing called life that we get to do, because you have someone that encourages and supports. And sometimes I get beside myself with some of the crazy ideas that I have, but he's here for it and he knows what he signed up for, you know? So 2020, I signed up for a pageant. Pandemic hit, which gave me that year to just kind of get my life in order and begin to realize what I had done, which was I signed up to allow people to judge me. And I paid them for it. Weird, you know? And so I coined this phrase, flourish within your means. And at the time, flourish within your means was all about budgeting and handling money and really learning how to be a cutie patootie on a budget. That's what I wanted to teach women is, hey, you don't have to break the bank in order to still be cute. And so that whole thing was, again, flourishing within your means. So being able to do what you want, but within your means. As it progressed, so having to take that year off, and the Lord does things like that, like throws you into these random sabbaticals, you know, or these random spaces of solitude. And it makes you, it gives you an opportunity to go back to the drawing board if you take him up on that offer. I'll say that. So as I was going through that, I started getting my health in order. I was diagnosed with lupus back in 2012. But believe it or not, learning that I had lupus wasn't the thing that changed my mind about my health. It was a pageant. Call it superficial, but it got my life in order. It wasn't that. It was because I was going to be in a pageant and I was going to be up against other women and I was terrified. So I started hiking every day. I started working out. I started eating differently. And that was a byproduct. My health. And also, there's no cure for lupus, but reversing a lot of the symptoms and side effects that I was experiencing came from that. So the pageant is a big deal. I ran for Mrs. Arizona and I ended up winning.
Amazing.
And so that was in June. That was in 2021. So we fast forward a year. As I was going through the pageant, to me, it was just a goal. It was just something that I've always wanted to do since I was a child. We never had the money to. Also, we don't see women of color in pageants, you know, so it's not like I grew up seeing this around me, but I was the one kid that had my grandmother raised me, by the way. So my grandmother was extremely encouraging in everything that I wanted to do. If I go back, flashback to a memory, my grandmother, there were auditions for Cinco de Mayo. This was right after Selena had passed away, and they were having auditions at school. I was in second grade. And no one told me that I couldn't audition for Selena. I know that I do not look any of the sort like Selena, not even close. Don't speak Spanish, but I know the songs. And it was my grandmother who helped me to get ready so that I can go down and audition because it didn't matter. And so I think that having someone in my corner that has always been a major cheerleader is what has me where I am right now. Fast forward, I became a teen parent. I got pregnant at 16. And then once again, it was my grandmother, same cheerleader in my corner. Fast forward, basically this point in my life where I decided that I was going to do a pageant. When I went through that process, I didn't think myself to be better than or greater than at any point in time. I knew that we paid for this and I wanted to win. That's it. Like I had no plans of going to the grand stage or anything, but I ended up sweeping here in Arizona. And so naturally that means you have to go and compete at the international pageant. And to know me is to know, well, I already won, so I don't know why I would go and compete again. And my director at the time is like, no, you have to go. This is what you do. And then remember, my platform was Flourish Within Your Means, which is all about budgeting. And we had no money for me to go, you know, all the way to Tennessee to participate in this pageant. And then also for any women that may or may not be interested, but just so you know, there's a lot of women in the pageant system that just have checkbooks and it's unlimited and they could just do this. We were not that. But what I will say, what we did have going there is we definitely had a firmer foundation. So whereas there were, you know, a lot of husbands not present, my husband was present every step of the way. Every time I came back to the room, he rubbed my feet because you're in heels all day. He made sure that all of my dresses and heels and makeup was all in order. So I go and I end up placing for my first time doing an international pageant. When I came back here to Arizona, my director asked me, you know, well, I would really like for you to compete again. And I said, no, but I would like to give this opportunity to other girls who would normally not have the opportunity to do something like this. There's a lot of things that you have to do with the crown and the sash. You have to go and shake hands, kiss babies, things of that nature. And people would be so excited, like, oh my gosh, you're Miss Arizona. And to me, it was just like, no, I'm Shequan. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Even though I did that, I still didn't feel like it was enough. I know that I had gifts and I knew that I was good at things, but I think that I had, however it happened, found myself around certain communities or people that said that, you know, well, you need to still be humble. You know, don't do too much. Don't be too loud. Don't, you know, just kind of quieting you. And I think that over time, I just accepted that. Like, I know that God called me to relationship. And all of a sudden, you know, I found myself in this space where I felt like I didn't even know what to do with relationships, you know? And so I decided that I really wanted to step out on this gift that I knew that I had been given. I'm good at making hard things easy. I love bringing the Bible to life. I love empowering women. I love seeing, honestly, it's not just women, it's people in general flourish.
Yeah.
So I told you that when I was in that space of solitude in 2020, God started kind of just like downloading some new things. What you're getting ready to go through is not just about flourishing financially, like flourishing within a budget. It's learning how to flourish mentally, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, physically. And so now that I'm here where I am, we've gone through these last 4 years. We experienced a great deal of loss. And I mean like immediate family loss. And it's kind of like this came out of nowhere. You know, first, as I went to the pageant to go compete internationally, I was praying the entire time that my grandfather wouldn't pass away during that time because he was on his way transitioning. We come back 3 months later, almost to the day, we lose my aunt. We think we're in the clear, and all of a sudden we lose my little cousin, who's also like a nephew as well. We think we're in the clear again, and literally almost a year to date, I lose my sister cousin. You know, it's the one cousin that like, you guys are more than just cousins. That's my sister. Imagine just when we think nothing more could happen, we lose my grandmother almost to the day. So while we're on a trip, on a flight to the funeral, we're planning another funeral. And so that kind of halted me in 2024. And we don't realize how fast time moves because it does not feel like it's been a year since I lost the biggest cheerleader in my life.
Yeah.
And what I've been healing through this past year is legit heartache. Like after losing my grandmother in 2024, it was just a feeling that I had never experienced in my life. And I even had to tell my husband, this is not something that you can help me with. And that sounds crazy because he's my partner and God has given me this man to walk through these things with me. And naturally, husbands want to fix it. They want to make sure that you're good. And I had to tell him that this is me and God. And it sounds very cliche because we hear the term, well, just give it to God. No, for real, I had to give this one to God. So I poured myself back into God. By the end of 2024, I just got to this point where I just couldn't anymore, like just frozen. And what have I done with what I've been given? And I don't know. That's what stuck out to me.
You talked about, you know, your grandmother raised you, and I'm so sorry you lost her just last year. I think it's so important for people to have women and family in their corner. I think everybody deserves that because that kind of just helps them along. Talk to me a little bit about like what it meant to have her in your corner as you were growing up. Just, I mean, from 16, you said you grew up with her, and just like what that relationship was like over the years as she continued to encourage you.
So I lost my mother to domestic violence when I was 5 at the time. We come from a generational cycle of domestic violence and having children at a young age. So my great grandmother, she had her first child 12, going on 13. And then my grandmother had her first child at 16. My grandmother's first daughter, my aunt that passed away, she had her first daughter at 12, going on 13. My mom had her first child, which was me, at 16. And then I had my first child at 16. On top of all of that, domestic violence has ran deep. So my great grandmother was killed as well by her partner. I watched my grandmother and my mother go through, man, just like there's moments that I can look back that just flash across my mind, and it's so vivid, and it's like it just happened. Where like I'm just seeing like my grandmother be pulverized, and we're little, we're like 4 or 5, and I'm sitting on the porch holding my cousin, the one that passed away, and my brother, and we're just sitting there crying because we're kids, you know. Fast forward, you have me who has now become pregnant. And then I found myself in an abusive relationship as a teenager. And I'm resolved. I'll say, I want you all to know that I am resolved. And so I can talk about a lot of these things. And it may be hard to listen to, but I do believe that there's freedom there. And so I no longer shy away from telling my story, telling this part of my story. But he beat me up really bad one day, and that's all it took. And I left my grandmother's house and never came back. This was when I was 17. So I went to multiple apartments and just anyone that would take me. And I told my grandmother, if I come back here, if I stay here, he's going to keep coming back. And that was something that she didn't understand because they always stayed in those abusive relationships. But me leaving was breaking the cycle. It hurts to be hit as a child. It's no different as an adult. And so I left and never looked back. My relationship with my grandmother, one, growing up, she also, when my mother passed away, she told me that I could call her mom. And I remember telling her, well, then if I call you mom, then I won't have a grandma, you know? And my grandmother was her name is Janice Ruth. And so her name literally means God is gracious, and she's a friend to those in need. But having someone like my grandmother in my corner meant that I could go and audition for Selena. It meant that if I wanted to sing Barry White in the 3rd grade talent show, Practice What You Preach, I could do that. Everything that I wanted to do, she supported that. Fast forward, I know that my grandmother and my grandfather were hurt when my mother was killed, of course, but I was apparently a spitting image. It's funny because everyone else can see that you look just like your parent, but you can't see it. But I was told that that was a part of it, is that I looked so much like my mom. I acted like her, same personality, and they just wanted to ensure that they nurtured a space for me to continue to grow and not end up back in the cycle. Yeah. So when I left and never looked back, and then I explained to her that I couldn't continue to go through that. We're talking about a generation that they don't understand PTSD. And after he beat me up, I struggled with PTSD severely. Night terrors, wetting the bed, afraid to go to sleep, things of that nature. And it's just a generation that doesn't understand the need for therapy. They don't understand mental health. And not because they don't want to, but that's just not where she came from. Yeah. My grandmother is the reason that I was able to go to school. I always had a babysitter. And so, man, and I don't want this to sound, ladies, like I was just out here holier than thou. Yeah. I just went to college and I just did everything right. I did a lot of things right. I also was at the club. Yeah. So I'll share that. Yeah. I met my husband at the club. And even when I started my relationship with God, my grandmother, even though she didn't raise us in church or anything, she was supportive. I also believe that did something for her as well, because she wasn't raised in it. Per se, the childhood or the background that she comes from, it would be difficult for one to want to believe that there is a true and loving God. Yeah, absolutely. Then that's just from her adverse childhood experiences. And so even up to winning the pageant, I literally dedicated my crown to her publicly because I'm not the woman that I am if I didn't have her in my corner. And I'm not saying this to say that she takes the place of God or, oh yeah, absolutely, this is my Jesus, I do believe that God does put certain vessels in the earth that are meant to be wells of water for you in particular. But God is so good in that, to know like how all of this was divinely orchestrated, us ending up with my grandmother. I have to share this part because it only makes sense that way. Yeah. Before my mother was murdered, I was told that she had a premonition and she knew that she had to get my brother and I to safety. And that was with my grandmother. So she drove from Vidalia, Georgia to Baytown, Texas, and dropped us off with my grandmother. What we did not know is that the man that killed her followed her all the way to Texas. He followed us all the way to Texas to my grandmother's house. That's not a small deal. The original plan was to kill all of us. Wow. And that's mind blowing. Praise the Lord. He changed her heart, Nonetheless, we fast forward and he follows her back to Georgia, and then he ends up murdering her there about a week later. So we weren't supposed to be here. Like anything could have happened in that moment of him following us all the way to my grandmother's house. And I know that, the next question might be, okay, well, what about your mom? Maybe God just has never given that to me to think about, or I was sheltered from that while I missed my mother. And of course, I would love to have grown up with my mom. This sounds really crazy to say, and I've never said it out loud. I do believe that it was a part of breaking, like ending the cycle. I know it sounds crazy, but it did.
Yeah.
Having someone like my grandmother in my corner meant new opportunity.
Yeah.
And she used to say that it would make her sad that she felt like she didn't get it right, or she didn't like do right by us, or she should have did better. But my grandmother literally did all that she could with what she knew how to. And it's not until you understand what someone, and I mean this in general, it's not just your parents or the people that raise you. When you understand where someone has come from, it changes your capacity of grace.
Absolutely.
For them. So I entered into this space called the forgiving place, that something else I made up, where after learning my grandmother's story, I was like, oh my gosh, I get it. Like the Lord just revealed everything. Like this all makes sense now. You had no clue. Like you didn't know better. You were never taught how to raise your own children. You were taught to run away. You were never taught about finances. You were never taught about health. You were never taught that it's wrong for someone to beat on you, to curse at you, to demoralize you mentally and emotionally. You were never taught these things. So when we're like having these moments of tension and I'm like, Grandma, don't you get it? And she's like, no, you know, like in her way, it's like, what do you do with that? But this is also your biggest cheerleader at the same time.
Absolutely. Shequan, I'm so glad that God illuminated like this breaking of the cycle for you. And I know that was over the course of so long. And I'm just so sorry for the loss, but how God just really showed up and was able to provide that joy and freedom to you. And I think that's what happens when we work through our own stories first personally, but also to share that with others and to kind of do what you're doing today is you're letting hope and freedom come through, because there is hope and freedom on the other side when we have Christ in our life. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit more about that freedom that you feel a part of your story and how you're able to, even though sometimes you feel maybe underutilized in your gifts, you're still being able to be stretched in those areas by sharing your story. So what would be some ways that you kind of experience freedom through that?
When I think of that and in those moments of my life, it does remind me of a passage of scripture that is when in First Kings, and that's with Elisha, and he comes in contact with a woman and in her jar of oil, and he asks her essentially, you know, like, what does she have? And she says to him, and I'm paraphrasing all of this. There was a part in her response that stuck out to me. And I cannot let it go. And she said, well, this is all I have. And I've been walking like that with my gift for the past however many years. Like, well, this is all I have, as if it's not enough or it's not good enough. And so Elijah ends up telling her, okay, well, grab all the containers that you can. God is going to fill them. And so she ends up doing that. But where I liken it unto me and where my mind began to change, because again, it's an old book, but it's very much alive, is I've been walking around with this gift in my pocket. Like, well, this is all I have. I have this. And the Lord is like, yeah, I gave that to you. And the expectation with his gift is that you would take it and go be a light, you know, instead of putting it under the bushel, you know, as the word says. And so as God has just been revealing, unraveling, illuminating this for me, I started thinking about how when we give gifts to our loved ones or to a friend, right, when they look at it, we're hoping that they're just as excited about it as we are when we bought it. And I started thinking about how God has given me so many different gifts, like the things that he puts my hands to. I say this because I'm free now, and I know that I can talk about these things and I can be proud of them because that's God's expectation. So the things that God has put my hands to they turn to gold. They're excellent. It's what he's instilled in me. And so if I'm likening myself like this lady with this little jar of oil and saying like, well, this is all I have, God is like, yeah, and I can multiply that, because God didn't send outside resources to come and just fill up the oil. The oil was already in the house within her capacity, already within her. And he was just filling up what was already there. And so when I'm thinking about my capacity, or I'm beginning to feel overwhelmed, or even if I'm downplaying my gift,
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. When I'm downplaying my gift, my prayer has been over these past couple of years, convict me quickly. Because I don't know if you guys have heard the phrase, like, you don't want to get to heaven and see the room full of gifts that were stored up that you never opened. Yeah. And so I leave myself now in such a vulnerable space because I want to be open. I want to be able to hear God in real time. And I want to be able to move in real time. I don't want to have to keep looking back saying like, oh, that's what you were trying to do. Because it's difficult to move forward, right? When we're not able to trace where it's going. Yeah. But that's faith. Faith is moving forward like it's already done. And so what has given me that freedom and the liberty and all that is being able to say, thank you, Lord, for the gifts that you've given me. I am appreciative and I am going to go and tell it on the mountain, and I'm going to stop thinking about what others think of it. I'm going to stop caring about whether I'm being too loud or being too much and pulling back, because if that's what you have given me, I need to steward it well.
So good. Shequan, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and just to know the hope and the freedom that is on the other side. I'm just so excited to hear what comes out of you speaking at the Baton Pass event. If people wanted to get connected to you, what is the best way that they can do that?
So they can find me on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. Shequan Show is SheQuanshow.
Perfect.
You can Google it and find everything from there as well. Shequanshow.com as well. So
yeah, everything is going to be linked in today's show notes. Shequan Palmer, thank you so much for being on the Parable Podcast.
Thank you, Danielle.
I so appreciate Shequan sharing her story today. Please come out and join us at Illuminate When Light Reveals in Chicago and Central Illinois. I know Arizona just had their event, and I'm sure it was amazing. And be sure to check out what all the Baton Pass has to offer on their website. Everything is available in the show notes today. And here are 2 reflection questions from our time with Shequan. Number 1. What cycle has God finally broke through in your family? Or maybe you can just start to see the light peeking through. Number 2, if you feel like you are underutilizing the gifts God gave you, what is one way you can embrace them more fully this week? If you are looking for more information on the Baton Pass, or you want to hear more stories from some of the women, we have a whole playlist of everybody that we have encountered through the Baton Pass, and we have some great stories for you there. Everything is available in today's show notes, as well as Shequan's information. Also, we couldn't forget my husband, Eric, for his superb editing skills on this episode. That is going to do it for today. I am grateful that you took the time to spend it with me. Remember, your parable showcases how God heals us from heartbreak. We'll see you back again next week on the Parable Podcast.